In this video, I'm breaking down the 5 most important comics in my collection. Welcome back to Comics Are Dope. I'm BJ Kicks, and this is my 5 comic challenge video. Now, a while back, I was actually challenged by Evolutionary Comics here on YouTube to show off the top 5 keys in my collection. And these could be, key issues that are worth a lot, or just some of the most important books in the collection. And I'm not even gonna lie, I saw the notification and then completely forgot about it until he asked me about it again in a live stream. And I was like, all right, cool. I'm going to jump on that ASAP. And ASAP didn't come quite ASAP. And in the meantime, a few of my other friends have jumped on the challenge. They have now called it the 5 comic challenge. So shout out to the homie Bunkmaster B, my man Dominic from the Comic Book Report. So people that you know and love from the Hangout, from the channel, from just being in the general comics community that I'm also a part of. And so now that they've taken it and run with it, I was like, hold on, let me make sure I make my video. And also, I just want to make sure I give credit to Evolutionary Comics for challenging me. Now, according to him, it was a challenge that was already out there. So who knows who the real originator was. But I did want to show Evolutionary Comics some love for challenging me and thus kind of igniting the fire that's going through the community right now. And with all that said, I'm going to show you my top 5 books in my collection. Now, listen, I could have done a top 5 list a bunch of different ways. So what I've decided on is kind of sentimental books. There's a lot of firsts here. And so these are honestly in no particular order, but here we go. I'm going to start with the first important book in my collection, and that is House of X, Powers of 10 by Jonathan Hickman. Now, if you know me, then you already know the story, but my first comic ever was House of X #1. I actually won it during a live stream. So that was the first comic story that I read as an ongoing and not just a one-off, oh, I found a comic book somewhere. And this was the book. This series is the reason I even started a pull list, and ultimately the reason you know about this channel on YouTube. Because without this, maybe I don't fall in love with comics the way that I have. So House of X Powers of 10, if you haven't read it, is an amazing story. It's Jonathan Hickman's 2019 reboot of the X-Men. It introduces, I won't tell you what it introduces, but let's just say it switches up the status quo for the X-Men quite tremendously and in a very exciting fashion. There's new revelations about certain characters. There's new revelations about the X-Men or the mutants' abilities. And it's led all the way up through all the comics that we're still enjoying now. This gave way to the whole Krakoa era, the dawn of X, the reign of X. And here soon, we're going to get the fall of X, presumably to conclude this whole era of the X-Men. I've really been enjoying it. So to the story that got me involved at all, House of X Powers of 10, that's got to be the first book on the list. Now, shortly after I started my pull list, I started to get a little disappointed, right? Because I was collecting X-Men or House of X Powers of 10, and the only other book that I was subscribed to was Batman. Batman at the time was written by Tom King, and it was one issue would be really good, the art would be really good, another issue would kind of fall off, and then of course I jumped in at the absolute worst jumping in point because I started out with issue 75, the beginning of the City of Bane storyline. And, it's in hindsight, not the best jumping in point, but it was exciting enough for me at the time. But that disappointing artwork led me to look for other stories, and people started telling me about trade paperbacks versus single issues and stuff. And one of my homies at work was like, look, if you are trying to find good comic book art, the name that your list should start and end with is Jim Lee. And so I went to the comic shop around the corner from my job and found a trade paperback of Batman Hush. So Batman Hush, written by Jeff Loeb with art by Jim Lee. If I'm completely honest with you guys, I feel like The Long Halloween is a better story than Hush, but Hush is also a 12-issue series. And it's like, it's got a who's who of Batman villains in it. So we see art from Jim Lee and some flashback scenes from Dustin Nguyen, but all up and through this, it's like no matter what page you stop on, you're gonna see something really, really cool. Like this, if you were looking for good comic book art, this was definitely a solid recommendation. And because the art is so good, and the story is not bad, it's just not as good as some other Jeff Loeb works, in my opinion. But because the story is so good, or because the art is so good, I end up recommending it a lot to people who were like, hey, what are the best Batman stories to read? And seeing this in the trade paperback format really sort of reinvigorated me and got me excited to check out other past stories. And so you can credit this book with my eventual love for collected editions, as Hush was my first trade paperback. So since we're talking about firsts, actually we'll talk about that a little bit later. So I'm going to switch it up for a second. I want to talk about something that is a first in a different type of way, right? So this is Four Kids Walk into a Bank. And this book is significant to me because it was the first time that I really took like a community suggestion to heart. And so I don't even remember how I got this book. I think I won it in a mainstream box or something like that. And when it came in the mail, my man Bunkmaster B, as well as my man Skipintosh, they were both like, oh, you gotta read this. And in fact, let's all read it together and kind of come together and talk about our thoughts on it. And so I ended up reading this as like a sort of book club with Skip and Bunkmaster B. It's only a 4-issue miniseries. This is written by Matthew Rosenberg with art by Tyler Boss. And honestly, man, it's really good. It's short and to the sweet. It's basically the way it sounds. Four kids walk into a bank. It's a heist book. But the reason they're trying to pull off this heist is just awesome. I'm a big fan of books with kids as the lead characters. I love like sort of coming of age type stories. Like this reminded me a lot of like The Sandlot. It's like the snotty nosed kid like cussing, chewing tobacco, trying to rob a bank, and all the in jokes and infighting amongst the kids while they try to pull off this heist. And the ending is so emotionally gripping. This was a great book. This is one I recommend a lot, but it's significant to me because this was the book that made me take the recommendations of the community seriously. Like this was a book that would not have necessarily been in my wheelhouse before, but once I read this, I was like, I gotta find more stuff like this. So Four Kids Walk into a Bank, that takes the number 3 spot on my top 5 comics list. Now we've got all right, I'll go ahead and do it. So you guys already know how much of a fan of Milestone Comics I am. And I was trying to figure out like, okay, I know one of these 5 spots has got to be a Milestone book. How do I decide which one? I ended up going with this one. This is Static issue 45. And basically I chose Static 45 because it's got the most sentimental value to me. This was the last book that I bought that gave me a complete run of Static issues 1 through 45, which is by far the hardest set to complete when it comes to Milestone Comics single issues. So this wasn't the book that completed my Milestone set, if I remember correctly. I think, no, it was. This was the book that completed my original run of Milestone Comics. But Hardware, Icon, Blood Syndicate, Death Wish, the Wise Son miniseries, the Shadow Cabinet, Zombie, Cobalt, all of these titles I started collecting basically during the pandemic. And when they announced that Static movie, Milestone Comics just started getting more and more scarce and more expensive on eBay. So this, for a long time, the only way you could get this was if you bought a slabbed copy, and those were going like upwards of $800. So somebody listed this on eBay for like $300. I submitted a best offer of $200 and they accepted. And I was like, sheesh, that's crazy. And so among the most expensive single issues in my collection, but also just one that I treasure the most. So Static, standing in for my entire collection of Milestone comics, takes the number 4 spot, even though these aren't really ranked in any particular order. Now, before I get to the final book in my top 5 challenge, I wanted to do a couple of honorable mentions. So we got to do the one that really got me into the DC universe proper, right? So for a long time, I was only reading X-Men and Batman books. Well, this book, Deceased, this was the local comic shop day variant cover. So you may not have even seen this cover. This is a Francisco Mattina cover, but the regular, the standard hardcover of Deceased features the image of Batman. I just liked this image of Joker better. And it's funny enough, I had never bought a hardcover from a comic shop before. And I remember like buying this and being really like, just kind of like, this is ridiculous over the $29 price tag. This is a $30 book. Just looking at the rest of my collection, you can see I got over that aversion to pricing after a while. But yeah, $30 hardcover. But what this does is it's written by Tom Taylor. Art on this. Who does the art in Deceased? Trevor Harrison. Should have known. But basically like a techno virus takes over the DC universe and turns everybody into zombies. But what I love about Deceased in all its Elseworlds goodness is that you get a quick like who's who in the DC universe. And although the voices of the characters are largely dependent on Tom Taylor's writing, he got me interested in like everybody in this book, from Green Arrow to Constantine, Zatanna, and Harley Quinn. But yeah, this book made me want to get into DC Comics. I've been familiar with all those heroes from like different animated adaptations and stuff, but this made me want to revisit them in comic form. So Deceased, not only was my first hardcover comic, but it was also the book that really got me entrenched in the DC universe and made me such a big DC fan. So that's one honorable mention. The second honorable mention, also a DC book, is this. This is Superman for All Seasons. And the reason I wanted to make this honorable mention, this is also an example of sort of taking recommendations from the community. But this is the book that changed my mind about Superman. You guys know I'm a Batman fan all day long. And to me, Superman was always just mid in comparison. And that opinion isn't necessarily changed really. But I feel like the reason I thought Superman was just so whack was just he didn't have the best adaptations. Like his movies aren't the best. Man of Steel was cool, I guess, but it's like it's not really all that faithful to the character. And so I always found myself like kind of on the outside of Superman fandom, not understanding why people were such a fan. And I ended up reading Superman Birthright, and that was cool. I liked it. It made me respect Superman, if not like him. I read Superman Brainiac, and I was like, oh yeah, I like the emotional family aspect of Superman books. But this one, For All Seasons, Superman for All Seasons made me a believer. This is Superman coming of age, deciding to be a hero, being met with challenges, and kind of coming back home to Smallville to recenter. And you really get a look at what makes Superman tick. And I think what makes Superman tick should be what makes any decent human tick. And that's what makes Superman so dope. But this was the book that convinced me that Superman was dope. So honorable mention goes to Superman for All Seasons. And finally, the last book in my 5 comics challenge, probably the most sentimental omnibus in my collection, Wolverine Omnibus Volume 1. So this is the infamous COVID flat spine variant. So during the pandemic is when I really got into collecting omnibus editions. And during the pandemic, like the early days of, March, April, May 2020, when books were coming out, they were selling out instantly. Like you'd go on in-stock trades, and if you didn't buy that book in the first 5 minutes, you were not getting that book. And so because of that, I actually missed out on the Wolverine Volume 1 Omnibus. The reason I was able to get this one months later at basically just above retail price was because I had gotten my first major sponsorship on my main YouTube channel at the time, my music marketing channel. And so they gave me, I think it was $300 at the time. And I took 150 of those dollars and bought this from Read Comics on eBay. Yes, I bought this from a UK-based retailer, which means I paid international shipping just because I wanted this cover so badly. I did not want the Frank Miller cover A. I needed this cover, the Steve McNiven direct market variant. Now, this subsequently ended up becoming the book that taught me not to like pay more than retail for out of print omnibus, because they have reprinted the Wolverine omnibus like 2 or 3 times since then. But at the time, this was the first time this book was coming back into print in ages, and they didn't think it was going to sell. So when it sold out, I thought it's never coming back again. So yeah, one of the more sentimental books in my collection, mostly because I paid for it with YouTube money. Also because I really, really wanted this cover and I was able to get it. And because Wolverine was one of my favorite characters as a kid. So with all that said, those were my top 5 books in my collection, the most sentimental books in my collection. Now, I could do top 5 a whole bunch of different ways. I could do my top 5 Batman stories. I could do my top 5 milestone single issues. I could do my top 5 covers in my collection. So let me know if you guys want to see any of those variations of this list in the comments down below. I got to give a huge shout out to the channel family for making this video possible. And another huge shout out to Organic Price Books for sponsoring the channel. There are some of these books that you can still get at Organic Price Books. Namely, you can grab the Batman Hush 20th anniversary hardcover edition. That's still available. And at the very least, you can get Wolverine Volume 3 from Organic Price Books. So got to give them huge shout outs. And thanks to you guys for watching the video. I'll see you in another one real soon. Until then, stay classy and make sure you read something dope today. Peace. Whoops, right quick. I forgot to challenge someone for this. So I'm going to send this challenge out to all my jabronis, all the OPB jabronis out there. Dominic, you've already done the challenge, but I want to see Day-Day. I want to see Noah from Ultimate Comics. I want to see Jess from OmniDog. Like, I need everybody, you know who you are, in the Jabronis chat. I need to see y'all's top 5 challenge. That's my challenge to you. And now, see you guys later.